Chapter 3, Inside Man. Scene 6, Todd. Todd was alone when he rode to the 9/11 memorial. None of his friends paid attention to the news, but when he heard that students had created the event, he grabbed his bike and headed to Pepperdine University. 3,000 strong, the waves of flags fluttered in the wind as the solemn gathering of people stood with their hands folded and their heads bowed. There was a palpable sense that the country was falling apart, and the 47th President of the United States was well on his way to becoming known as the autocrat. COVID was over, but a war raged in Europe, and America was being redefined to the rest of the world. 11th grade history had finally gone beyond myth to reveal a truth about the country. Its promise of equality, prosperity, and freedom had never been available to everyone. Todd took out his phone, turned away from the crowd, and lowered himself onto a cool patch of grass under a tree. The video was already queued up on the screen, a hijacked plane striking the second tower of the World Trade Center. It was at once disturbing and surreal, an earth-shattering event that played like a movie. Unable to take his eyes off the screen, Todd wondered what it was like to be alive in 2001. There was the rustle of grass before a nasally voice slithered over his shoulder. "Well, that's kind of morbid," the boy said. Todd cocked his head and turned around. As a jock, he didn't know any fat kids, and his face screwed up in disgust at the sight of a belly flopping over a pair of ill-fitting jeans. With an air of indignation, the boy slid a pudgy thumb through one of the hooks in his pants. "Do you believe in salvation?" he asked. Todd glanced at the phone, then back at the kid. 3,000 people died, he hissed. "Well," a shrug, "let's hope they're in heaven with Christ." Todd shook his head, wondering why it wasn't self-evident in a tragedy like 9/11 that the world was better off without religion. Pepperdine was a Christian university, but the boy seemed to be about his age. 16 was too young to be a Jesus freak. "I believe in doing good for his own sake," Todd said, without some vague payoff in the future. After a 2-hour debate, the kid who called himself Razor pointed at a white building with a curved roof and said, "We meet at Starford Chapel." He patted his chest. "Me and a bunch of kids. I dare you to come." Straightening his back, Todd wanted to say "fuck you," but the dare's primordial tug was like a rope around his neck. He ground his teeth and said, "Will there be girls?" Razor grinned, and all the tension in the air disappeared. "There will be maidens aplenty," he said. Todd had a pleasant day with the Starford Chapel youth, but the experience only confirmed his feelings about religion. Through hocus pocus and magical thinking, a person could justify anything, like feeding the poor or hijacking a plane to kill 3,000 people. Todd never returned to the group, but 20 years later, that mutually idealistic teen had become one of his oldest friends. Razor's message that morning was simple. The waves of flags, 10 a.m. The memorial was long gone by the middle of January, and the students were still on winter break. Being practically empty, the campus was the perfect place to meet a fellow pop watcher. Pepperdine University was at the top of a hill, and Todd remembered pedaling like a madman on his first visit to Alumni Park. He savored the feel of the gold-winged cruiser between his legs as he turned off Pacific Coast Highway onto John Tyler Drive. He hadn't seen Razor since before the party, but he had a feeling this meeting had something to do with the aftermath of stealing the video of Olympia. Todd wasn't aware of Victor Dacos' reaction, but he was struck by the fact that the patriarch's daughter had spent the last 4 nights with Irene and her parents. Apparently, this was the one place they felt safe, having been betrayed without knowing by whom. Eleanor Harrington was a stay-at-home mom, albeit with considerable help. Natalia, by contrast, had a distinguished legal career and managed House Dacos along with Victor. Todd eventually figured out that, growing up, Olympia spent her days in the Harrington mansion, where a group of 20 kids received personalized instruction from private elementary school teachers. During those years, Victor's airship flew Olympia back to Nevada every night. Todd wanted to know more, but Irene was being coy as a way to get him to accept her request to connect via telepathy. "You would be my first," she'd said. "One of the many things you'd learn as soon as we did it." You wouldn't be mine, though, Todd thought, as he pulled into the lot on John Tyler Drive and Banowski Boulevard. Having no idea whether all this spy shit was worth it, Todd was looking forward to this meeting. A church-like silence pervaded the campus as he cut the engine and climbed off his bike. But for a smattering of clouds, the ocean and the sky were the same shade of blue. The water spread out like a giant mirror from the shore all the way to the horizon. To the north, south, and east, the Santa Monica Mountains curved in a majestic ring. The expanse of the cliffs, combined with the sky and ocean, made the park feel like the center of the world. In brown overalls and leather cowboy boots, Razor sat with his arms folded and his back against the trunk of a tree. The cattleman's crop and sideburns framed his round face. His voice had grown deeper over the years, but it still had a nasally tone. "Wasn't sure you'd get the reference," Razor said. Stretching, Todd raised his hands and puffed his hair out like a diva. "I remember high school." He lowered himself to the ground. "Which I thought you hated." "I did." "Then why?" Todd spread his arms to indicate their spectacular view. "We were 16 the last time we were here." 16, Razor said, "the last time you were here." Leaning away from the tree, he craned his neck toward the building with the curved white roof. The red pickup next to Stauffer Chapel was the perfect complement to a cybersecurity analyst dressed in a cowboy getup. Its interior was like a spaceship on wheels, while the exterior was designed to resemble an antique. They shared a love for the cutting edge, but Todd did not understand this need to cosplay tradition. "Oh, that's right," he said. "You're what's it called again?" "Deacon." Razor rolled his eyes. "Look, your villa's not safe." The last time they met, Todd was madder at Razor than he'd ever been. "You're reading my text and emails," he said. "The mission is the only reason I didn't kick your ass." Flushed with guilt, Razor's face took on the appearance of a hairy tomato. "I'm just trying to what?" Razor slapped his legs and whispered, "We have reason to believe your house is bugged." "Bullshit," Todd growled. "Why would anybody do that?" He tapped his temple. "Everything is up here." Leaning forward, Todd used his index finger to poke Razor in the chest. "You're the only one snooping around in my head." "I'll stop." "When?" "Now!" Half a dozen birds fluttered to the sky, causing 3 times as many leaves to rustle in their wake. Razor said, "This isn't about invading your privacy." With desperation in his eyes, he raised his right hand in the air. "For real, man, I'm just worried you're going to disappear, like you did when you started dating, you know." In the days after her death, Todd's reaction to hearing her name had alarmed everyone he knew. Fearing a total meltdown, family and friends had grown reluctant to remind him of his loss. "Sienna man," he sighed. "You can say it." Razor's eyes went wide, and his mouth practically fell to the ground. "Gosh," he said, "you're in love with that world, aren't you?" Todd wasn't on a path to married life, as he'd been with Sienna, but even if he managed to avoid telepathy with Irene, he would probably neglect his only single friend. "Okay," Todd said, "point taken. Stop the hacking, and I won't disappear." "I can make a couple of tweaks to your phone," Razor said. "Tighten up your security." Todd raised his eyebrows and tilted his head to one side. "Thanks," he said. "By the way, we were wrong about the Royals." His hand shot out before Razor could object. "Olympia, David, and Thaddeus are pretty cool." Razor hunched his shoulders and sneered, "The Council is evil." Todd let out a breath and rolled his eyes. As a rational humanist, he considered the Council unhealthy for society. The word evil seemed over the top, but it made sense given Razor's religious perspective. "The Royals aren't on the Council," Todd said. "Besides, they were kids in the 2030s. When the other man grinned, Todd thought, "Oh, fuck, here it comes." "That's right," Razor rubbed his chin. "You're about, 10 years older than Irene?" The searchlight intensity of Razor's admiration made Todd blush and turn away. Irene was such a good fit, he rarely noticed the 14 years that lay between them. He didn't feel out of place at the party until they were sitting at the pool with Selena. There was something about being with the president's daughter that made him painfully aware that he was 36, while everyone else in the house was around 22. Selena was also there, Todd said. "She's probably the only—" "You said the Royals were cool," Razor sucked his teeth. "What about the Royal adjacent?" "Jesus," Todd said, "can't you just let it go?" Razor leaned forward and hissed, "Don't take the Lord's name in vain." In a placating gesture, Todd raised his hands, palms forward. Then, using the tone of a parent explaining something to a child, he said, "It was a party. People drinking and dancing and having a good time." He sighed. "Selena's probably the only one who knows anything about the 30s. Razor narrowed his eyes. Why do you say that? Her father was part of the armed forces movement, remember? Roberto Gonzalez and Devin Wayne were hailed as heroes after their group of lieutenant colonels started the revolution that toppled the autocrat. Now, they were so enmeshed with the council that Todd had forgotten there was a time when he'd admired both men. Razor asked, Does Olympia think that video went viral because of her? Probably, Todd said. By the way Irene talks, it sounds like they both do. He spread his hands like a lawyer pleading a case. That's my point. There were kids during the Coronation Revolution. Razor tilted his head and cast his eyes to the sky as if understanding lay in the air. And the Reformation that followed. Exactly. Glancing at the ocean, Todd said under his breath, Noble fucking houses. He turned back to Razor. Philip Harrington sounds like a wonderful father, but he wasn't elected. He flicked a hand in the air as if he could pluck the thought away like a piece of lint. I don't get why so many people have accepted this imperial bullshit. Heaven is high, Razor shrugged, and the emperor is far away. Speaking of which, we have it on good authority that our plan is working. Todd raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Have you ever seen a wind tunnel? A what? Razor mimed the act of molding a tube over his lap. A tunnel of air, he grinned, in the sky. Todd thought about Camelot 1 and all the things Irene told him about proscenium. It struck him as odd that she never mentioned anything about wind tunnels. No, Todd said, I haven't. As far as we know, until last year, there were only 2 airships. Dacos kept one for himself and gave the other to Irene's father. And now, Razor pumped his eyebrows like the 20th century comedian Groucho Marx. Gorgeous Olympia has one, a mobile research center called Avalon. Todd laughed. He'd forgotten about Razor's crush on the Dacos Royal. You would die for that girl, he thought, if by some miracle you met. As it happens, Todd said, they were in Paris an hour ago. Point is, Razor tapped his nose, we've got a wind tunnel sighting group, made up of people who work outside. When they see tunnels, we use their times and locations to construct a flight path. He leaned forward and whispered, The morning after the party, Victor Tacos flew to New York. Later that day, Philip Harrington flew to Texas, and then here. To meet Watson and Tafuri? Todd asked. Why else? Is that normal for them? No. As Razor launched into an explanation of the rivalry between the patriarchs of California and Texas, Todd felt his cranial phone come to life in his head. He raised a finger in the air. 1 sec, I've got a text coming in from Irene. I, hey, T, hey, what's up? I, care for some company? T, if it's you, of course. I, what about Olympia? Todd chuckled. T, sounds interesting. Are you still in Paris? I, yeah, but we could be there in half an hour. We're on Avalon, Olympia's airship. T, when will I get to see one of these things? I, today. I'll ask her not to cloak it until we're over your house. N.O., can you have 3 pairs of sandals ready? We're not able to bring our shoes. T, you can fly from Paris to Malibu in 30 minutes, but you won't have any shoes? I, you'll see. Todd was smiling as he shut Monocle down. Looks like I'm about to see an airship. Razor's eyes went wide. Take a photo. Do you think that's wise? Todd said. Telepathy monitors everything that happens on the phone. Razor slumped forward and slapped his head. You've been a model since high school. Don't you have any legacy equipment? Todd scrunched his nose. Like what? I don't know. Razor ran his eyes along the grass as if a collection of devices was scattered around his boots. I'm pretty sure I've got an old camera somewhere, don't you? Todd cocked his head. He was genuinely surprised by the question. I'm Todd Giannopoulos, he said, not a photographer. The focus is always on me. He rose to his feet. Gotta go. She'll be here in 30. Remember, Razor pleaded. No more snooping, but you promised. Yeah, Todd said. Don't disappear. He felt the odd sensation of being a teenager again as they went their separate ways. Todd was about to meet a girl while it was likely that Razor would spend the rest of his day alone. The other man's crush notwithstanding, bringing him back to the house to meet Olympia was out of the question. Feeling sorry for his friend, Todd rifled through memories of all the women he'd met over the years, but none would be interested in an overweight cybersecurity analyst who moonlighted as a hacker for the resistance. As he committed to solving that problem, something Irene had said struck him as odd. 3 pairs of sandals, Todd thought. Besides Olympia, who else is coming? The Dacos world had avoided Selena at the party, but the friendship between Irene and the president's daughter seemed genuine. It looked like Todd was going back to a house full of girls, a situation he hadn't experienced since before Siena. It's been 4 days since he and Irene had seen each other, even though they communicated every hour through text and emails. This may be an awkward way to get back together. Selena had flirted a couple of times while they were talking at the pool. Gonna have to keep that in check, Todd thought as he parked the bike in the garage and brought 3 pairs of sandals to the deck. They were coming from the east, so he turned away from the ocean and leaned his back against the railing. Todd would have missed the tunnel if he hadn't been expecting it. Within the blink of an eye, there was the massive formation of clouds 1,000 feet overhead. The streak of white was stark against the blue sky. Turning back toward the Pacific, Todd followed the tubular thing to its end. The wind tunnel's opening was directly above the point where the ocean met the shore. His mouth agape, Todd watched as a small island emerged from the maw of the vortex. It was gunmetal gray and looked like the mothership in an alien invasion movie. As his heart pounded in his chest, Todd was able to make out the intricate patterns of pipes, vents, and cables that spread out like a giant maze on the bottom of the ship. There was an indelible impression of power as he admired the sheer scale of its machinery. The tunnel dissipated moments later, like a giant mass of white sand being blown apart in the sky. Todd blinked, thinking maybe he was dreaming. Besides the ship hovering in the sky, the after image in his mind was the only evidence of what he'd just witnessed. There was a tunnel a second ago, he thought, spread out as far as the eye could see. I'm sure of it. His doubt stemmed from the fact that most of the giant cones seemed to have formed and disappeared all at once. A sighting like this would dominate the news if the patriarchs didn't control the media. Instinctively, Todd raised his hand an inch away from his face and wondered with bated breath what was going to happen next. Every muscle in his body went taut when there was a flash of light and the island in the sky disappeared. "I'll ask her not to cloak it," Irene had said, "until we're over your house." For the first time in his life, Todd had been witness to the reason Victor Dacos was one of the most feared men in the world. This revelation of power raised the stakes of having betrayed Irene and Olympia. The hair rose on the back of Todd's neck as he recalled what Razor had said. "We have reason to believe your house is bugged," wondering whether, at this very moment, he was being watched. Todd's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced nervously around. His attention was drawn back to the sky when 3 black dots appeared in the area where the island had been. Missiles, Todd wondered, torpedoes, or something else? As they got closer to land, it was clear someone was guiding the 3 tubular objects. Their flight was playful, like birds, banking in smooth arcs, circling one another, taking turns being in the lead. Todd was so enthralled, all he could do was lean forward, place his elbows on the railing, and enjoy the show. He didn't remember the 3 pairs of sandals until the tubes came in for a landing on the beach. Flats in hand, Todd descended the stairs. A blast of wind blew his hair out like a mane as he stepped gingerly toward the sleek black tubes. It was as if they'd landed on an invisible platform. Like the island in the sky, they didn't seem to be affected by gravity. Out of this trio of futuristic angels, Todd wanted Irene to be the first one to appear. His wish was granted when her bright smile, red hair, and green eyes popped out, sprinted forward, and plunged into his arms. Savoring her warmth, he lost himself in the scent of vanilla with a hint of rose. The sun warmed his skin where his blue shorts and white shirts left his arms and legs exposed. If this is the price of being watched, Todd thought, squeezing her tight and inhaling deeply, I don't give a shit. His eyes were shut when the second door opened, so he didn't know who'd emerged until he heard Olympia say, "So this is how the 75 percentile live." She was dressed in an emerald two-piece and scanning the rear of the villa like an archaeologist analyzing crude carvings on the wall of a cave. The noble houses were full of splendor, and Todd was struck by how imperial she seemed, being out of her element. Olympia strode across the sand as if she owned the place, causing him to square his back. Irene grabbed his hand and said, "Let's get something to drink." She tried to tug him toward the house. "I'm parched." Todd raised his other hand to indicate the sandals. Then, launching Monaco, he sent her a text. "Tea, The best way to deal with this is to treat her like just another guest. He handed one pair to Irene and another to Olympia as she approached. "Hello again," Olympia said. "Beautiful thing." The women tossed the sandals on the ground, and then, as they slipped their feet inside, Irene's face brightened. "You've got to see this painting." She grabbed Olympia's arm. "Painting of what?" "He looks just like his mom," Irene said, dragging her onto the deck. Todd turned toward the third tube just as Olympia said over his shoulder, "Genetically speaking, that's not surprising. His mother's Brazilian, correct?" Like a golem summoned by the conversation Todd had with Razor less than an hour ago, Devin Wayne emerged from the last tube. His black bathing suit blended perfectly with his ebony skin. Todd was fit, but Devin looked like a warrior that had been chiseled from a block of pure onyx. It was hard to know what was more surprising, his presence or the smile on his face. Instinctively, Todd did the bro-to-bro thing. "Nice ride," he said, glancing down at the tubes. Devin followed his gaze. "Yeah," he said, "they're great. You should try one later." He accepted the last pair of flats, tossed them on the ground, and slipped his feet inside. His attention was drawn to the house next door when Todd's neighbor emerged, surfboard in hand. "I'm guessing that's why you live here," Devin said. "Been carving since I was 8, Todd replied. Turning toward the villa, they were met with 2 very clear stares of approval. The women had helped themselves to a bottle of wine and were nibbling on chunks of Gouda. Under his breath, Devin said, "You know this was a setup." "Yeah," Todd grunted. "I feel like I'm playing with fire." "Ha!" Devin laughed. "How the fuck do you think I feel?" The "I'm only here because of my girlfriend" energy oozing out of Devin left Todd with the impression that a lot had happened during the last 4 days. He felt an odd sensation of kinship, being that they were the only 2 guys in the world dating female royals. Given the threat posed by Olympia's father, it was as if they were like brothers in arms. As Todd slipped back into the role of host, it felt like a good time to be genuine. "I really appreciate what you and the other colonels did," he said, "back when, you know." The pivot in conversation clearly took Devin by surprise. His head jerked back, and there was a flash of recognition on his face. "Thanks," he said. Seizing the moment of candor, he asked, "How old are you? 32? Todd was absolutely certain this man was older than him, so he grinned and said, "Close. How old are you?" Devin chuckled. "Touché." When they were steps away from the 2 women on the deck, Devin glanced up at their wine and asked, "You got any beer in this joint?" Half an hour later, the 2 couples settled onto the love seats that provided an excellent view of the ocean. Devin turned to Olympia and said, "If you're best friends, why don't you have a cranial phone?" "Dad won't let me," she replied. Devin narrowed his eyes. "Does he think they're dangerous?" Olympia shrugged. It seemed like an attempt to be dismissive, but Ty got the impression that Devin's questions were making her uncomfortable. "I don't think that's it," she said. Irene's legs were crossed, and, as if bursting with a sudden fit of anger, her left foot quivered up and down, and she said, "No one in the other houses has a phone. They don't trust us." Devin took a swig of beer. To be honest, he pointed at Todd. "He's the reason I took the plunge." Irene grinned. "After that ad, the phone went from niche to mainstream. That's what Father says." Feeling a surge of adrenaline, Todd said, "You asked him about me?" "No," she said in a sheepish voice. "I heard him say that to Mom." Devin asked Todd, "Have you met him?" "A couple of times." Todd met the other man's eyes. "In 38. The girl's attention ping-ponged between the 2 men, but Olympia was the one to say, "Why is that year significant?" She unwrapped her arm from Devin's and turned toward him by scooting her butt to the corner of the love seat. When Devin hesitated, Todd couldn't help himself. "What makes you think it is?" Olympia narrowed her eyes. "By the way you said it." In a low voice, Devin said, "That was the year the president and I appeared with your father." When Olympia's eyes went wide, Devin went on to say, "Of course, Beto wasn't president back then, but we were heroes." Todd filled the pause. "Really?" Irene squeaked. As he spoke to Olympia, Todd used every ounce of control he had to keep his voice flat. 38 is when your father gave his return to decency speech. The line that everyone quoted was out of Todd's mouth like the programming it was meant to be. "The noble houses will give Americans pride in their government again." To quell the anger that threatened to rise, Todd raised the bottle to his lips, took a swig, and made sure not to leave an awkward silence. Devin and Beto were there as a physical manifestation of the country we could be. Olympia tilted her head to one side and gave Devin a piercing look. I feel really strange finding this out now, she said. I feel naive. She waved a hand across the table. I've always wondered why Father wouldn't allow me to have a cranial phone. She turned to Irene. I don't understand their relationship. Do you? Irene shook her head. No, I don't. Olympia leaned forward and placed a hand on Devin's arm. I can't do telepathy, so I need you to volunteer stuff. Devin's next words were guttural, as if they were stuck in his throat. Like what? Like why, air quotes, your appearance at that speech, Olympia lowered her hands, was important. Taking advantage of the moment, Todd turned to Irene and said, You want to go for a walk? Yes. Todd finished his drink and placed his glass on the table. We'll be back. He met Devin's eye. My house is your house. Help yourself to whatever you need. That earned a look of respect from Devin. Once he and Irene descended the stairs, Todd glanced up toward the sky. You have any idea how that thing works? Irene shook her head. None. Olympia is part of the design team, though. Being that this was his first time hearing this from her, Todd pretended he hadn't known. Really? Yes, she's brilliant. Todd thought about the other Dacos kin. Brandon was so obviously crazy that he was banned from the salon despite his money. Overcompensating for the underachieving sibling? The glow fled Irene's face, and Todd regretted bringing it up. Rumor had it that the boy had a crush on Irene, one that went back to when they were all kids. Todd changed the subject. Must have been lonely growing up as an only child. Irene shrugged. I spent a lot of time with Olympia. My mom doesn't work, but Mrs. Dacos does, so I was either on the island or she was at my house. We live like sisters. Saliva filled Todd's mouth, and he fought the urge to spit. Did she really not know what Natalia Dacos did for a living? In all those years, had the name Excalibur never come up? Is it possible that she's completely oblivious to the existence of the new rule? Indignation rose in Todd like a fire. He remained quiet until he was sure derision wouldn't show in his voice. Who do you resemble most, your mom or your dad? Todd's heart leapt when Irene's smile returned. Neither, actually, she said. Somehow, I got my hair color from my Aunt Hattie, but everything else is just me. They'd made it almost to the cove, an isolated area far away from any houses. Todd reached out, took Irene's hand into his own, and filled his chest with the truth. You don't know everything about me, but I hope you're confident in this. Wrapping his free arm around her butt, Todd pulled her up until their lips were close enough to touch. But to his surprise, Irene began to suck with a ferocity that caught him off guard. She ran her hands frantically over his chest, as if she had to inspect every inch before he disappeared. This was the first time they'd kissed, and Todd suspected she was a virgin in more ways than one. As if to let her know there was no need to rush, he held her right hand over his chest so she could take her time caressing the muscle. To Todd's relief, her mouth relaxed, and they began to savor the kiss together. He doubted she even weighed 120 pounds, for which Todd was thankful. They kissed so long she seemed to have forgotten her feet weren't touching the ground. After a while, she lifted her head. Her eyes shimmered in an astonishing shade of green. Irene smiled. You can put me down now. I don't want to. His arms were aching, but given his secret, he was happy for another chance to tell her something that was true. Despite the pain, he didn't want to put her down. They were so close, she couldn't hide what she was doing as she ran her eyes along the curve of his nose, the flat of his forehead, down the strands of his hair. Do you think of yourself as Brazilian or Greek? Todd said, well, on the one hand, there's Mom.
Ela é do lugar mais bonito com as pessoas mais bonitas.
There was a warmth in the words, as their meaning flooded his mind. She's from the most beautiful place with the most beautiful people. Irene's face burst into a grin. It was clear she liked their sound but didn't have a clue what they meant. Are you fluent in Greek as well? She asked.
Σε ρίχνω κάτω, σε γδίνω και σε κρατώ για ολόκληρο το Σαββατοκύριακο.
He said, I will throw you on the ground, rip your clothes off, and fuck you for the whole weekend. Wow, Irene said. That's so impressive. Oh, Todd breathed. You just wait. Hearing his tone, Irene narrowed her eyes and tilted her head back. Todd, what did you just say to me in Greek? If you stay tonight, Todd said, you'll know that and more.